Thank you so much and good evening to everybody. We've got an interesting panel discussion. The theme of the whole convention is 40 after 40. So we've got three guys who are 40, Sadique, Sandeep and Vivek, and three after 40. So that's an interesting panel for you. So let's start the first question related to what's happening right now. We are running slightly late, so it's all about timing. So Sadique, while a session which begins late, it's still okay to catch up. What should be the right time to start retirement planning?
Good evening, everybody. Thanks to Outlook Money. So I'll tell you my own story and then maybe connect it to the right time. I started my investments during the first year of my working. And I think I was around 24, 25, my first salary. And the first investment was in ATC ELSS. I never knew that it was for retirement. But ultimately now, as I look back, it looks like that was for retirement. And ultimately, it has built up to a good corpus. So there's a saying, Amit, that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years back. The next best time is now. So to that extent, the earlier, the better. But and it's easy to say, but many of us really don't get into thinking about retirement early. What I would like to kind of convey around this is the right time. More than thinking about retirement, it's about the habit of savings and investing. Doesn't really matter whether you're thinking about retirement at that point in time. The earlier you get into that, the better it is. And I'm very sure, very confident that people who get into the habit of saving and investment will figure out a way and have a good retirement corpus at the end. So that's what I would like to put across as the right time.
Brilliant, brilliant. Sadiq, while you say that you started with your first salary at 24, you actually look 23 now. So that's a different matter altogether. Well, let me come to Sandeep next. And when we talk about retirement planning, if you are, I mean, the way Sadiq has put it is a brilliant thing to start a habit. But even at a later date, when you realize that you now saving for retirement or planning for retirement, what are the costs that you should keep in mind in order to save for that phase of retirement?
So Amit, thank you for having me and thanks to Outlook Money. I think, like Sadiq said, first of all is to start soon is important. The sooner you do it is great. The whole, there's one line that Charlie Munger said, and this concept called inversion, right? Where you say that if I find out where I'm going to die, I will just not go there, right? And the point I'm trying to make is that when it comes to cost, the real cost is the cost of the mistakes that we make when it comes to investing. Investing or good investing is actually about avoiding mistakes rather than making some great decisions. And the real cost is, I think it was referred to in the previous panel about trading, F&O. Those are actually the costs that one incurs, or the mistakes that one incurs is significantly more expensive than the fees, commissions, etc. Those are also important, and optimizing for that is very critical. But in the stage of the growth that we are seeing here in India in terms of financial markets, I think one area of concern is that probably we are getting into investment instruments which are not appropriate from a long-term retirement perspective. There's some great work happening on the mutual fund side. There is some great work happening overall financial planning. But when it comes to trading, F&O, etc., there are some causes for concern. So I would say that's the real cost, and that's something that we should try and avoid.
That's a brilliant answer. And incidentally, it reminds me of one conversation between a company CEO and a CFO. The CFO said that, you know, how much is the cost of training the team? The CEO replied back saying, do you know the cost that we incur when we don't train them? And your answer was exactly similar. A lot of times I hear people talking about the cost of advice or cost of commission, and they don't know what is the cost of not taking advice. I think brilliantly said, because recently SEBI came out with a paper which said that 90% of traders in derivatives lose money. And still, even today, I was talking to one of the colleagues outside, and she mentioned that, a younger colleague, and she said, a lot of her friends, her age group, they still want to get into options and cryptocurrencies, whereas mutual fund sounds too grandparent, age product. So I think this is a brilliant point, and I just want to rephrase that again. Now, that is one part of the cost which you incur unknowingly. But there are a few costs that one has to incur in retirement years. And Lovaii, this is not by design, it just happened by default that I'm asking a question post-retirement. Okay, so just take it easy. What are the significant costs that change between the younger age and the post-retirement age? And I'm assuming that post-retirement is typically 60, 65 years of age. How does the cost structure change?
So I think life happens, right? When, irrespective of whatever you may plan, you may do, the reality of life happens. So you might have a roadmap, this is what you are intending to do, but it changes. So I'm going to try and take some examples of situations where costs are things which people have not planned for. So for example, the couple has planned for retirement and they say, okay, I'm going to continue to live in Mumbai after my retirement. But at some point in their retirement, one of them passes away. And now this person is left alone. One child is in Delhi, but one child is in US. So suddenly the cost of living in one of the other cities, because that's what the social structure demands, that's what the children are saying, that, you know, if you come to one of our places, that's where we'll be able to take better care of you. And of course, there could be a situation where you say, forget it, I'm going to continue to live on my own, but many things which I assumed that I would do together, let's say, get into an Uber and go, now I want a driver full time. So I'm taking costs which are, I mean, beyond what everybody talks about. Medical, etc., of course, are there. But I think some of these are important to think through and in some way be ready to have a little bit of money kept aside for emergencies even during retirement, which may not be medical, may not be travel, may not be gifting. It's something which you don't know and you need to prepare for.
Yeah, that's a very powerful point, because there are many unanticipated, unimaginable things that may happen, and one needs to be prepared. I mean, booking an Uber is a very classic example that sometimes you've seen that people are not, or rather, if I may use the word, they are technologically challenged. And one partner may be using Uber, the app to book Uber, the other may not. And these are significant situations. Now let's say, and Dhruv, I'm coming to you now, this is about creating that corpus for retirement. Let's say somebody probably started late or started small, whatever be the case, and one has tried to accumulate, but closer to retirement, one realizes that I'm falling significantly short of the targeted accumulation. What are the options available? And options as in, not the derivative language, obviously. But what are the options available for such a person?
Actually, the choices are very hard. The only choices are you have to either reduce your spending, because you have to increase savings so that you can save more in a short period of time. And the other option is that many times people are forced to increase your age of retirement. You need to continue working. So I think that is where it is so important that what Sadique said, for people to start early. Because the more you postpone, the choices are, as I said, just too hard. You have to actually reduce your spending, or you have to increase your working life. There's no third option.
Now, when you say increase the working life, that may also mean part-time work. It may not be full-time employment, but a part-time work.
And that is what we are seeing in many cases, I've, a lot of, I would say, people who have worked their whole life in government, in bureaucracy, Most of their savings have gone into their pension or provident fund. They don't have equity as an asset class. They've not invested in real estate because they've been staying in government quarters. And when they retire, the corpus is not enough. So they continue to, they have to reduce, your standard of living goes down. When you've been working at a high post in a government organization, a lot of facilities are there. So there is you have to compromise, what we've seen cases where they have to compromise the standard of living, and then they have, by force, they have to take up, consulting assignments if you have not built up the savings.
Again, it just goes back to what Sadique also said. Start as early as possible. Incidentally, the way he started from his first salary, I think that's the best time to start. PGIM, one of the associate sponsors for this event, did a survey recently, and they figured out that the second income that one can generate gives significant amount of confidence to a lot of people. I think that they already put up that report on their website, and it's a powerful statement. So yeah, either delay retirement or cut down on the cost. Vivek, now retirement is a phase where throughout life somebody might have invested, and some of them might have forgotten how they've invested and where they've invested. Now in this case, two challenges happen. One challenge is access to money when the person is incapacitated, and second is passing on the estate to the legal heirs. What are the things that one should keep in mind, keeping these two issues under consideration?
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. So typically, I think these are very simple mechanisms which we need to put in place. So essentially, typically in any investment, you will realize is that there is a single holding option with a nomination, and there is an option where it is either or survivor, right? So these options are very powerful when you encounter such a life phase or a life stage which suddenly derails everything completely. So we have planned for something, and this life event happens and everything gets derailed. That is a point of time. Options like this become very important. Okay, many a times there is a lazy investing style. We don't even look at it. We just start something. We don't even ask that who is the second holder, who is the nominee. Okay, it is good that today SEBI has started it to be mandatory that if you are a single holder, there has to be a nomination. But a nomination will only work when there is a death event, when there is, the person is living, okay? In which case, a nomination is of no use at that point of time. And therefore, an either or survivor option can really work wonders. So what I want to drive the point is that there are simple solutions to this problem. Okay, if we look around and if we ask the right questions, we put a structure in place. I have also seen cases where people keep tweaking with the structure, single holding, either or survivor, joint holding, and they themselves don't know what kind. They will have a portfolio, a nice portfolio, but it will have different structures. So this is going to confuse the person who is going to inherit, number one, if there is a death, or it will confuse a person who has to use the money for that person's medical treatment and you don't have access to money. That can be the worst thing which can ever happen. So very important that, before you even build a building, you start working on the foundation, right? Yeah. So, I think it may not be rocket science, very simple, but I have seen many people not following that framework, and different frameworks, sometimes online investing happens. It happens very quickly, but I think it is good to just pause for a while, kind of check, and then go ahead with all your investments.
That's a brilliant point. And just because you use the word rocket science, I just want to add, a lot of times rocket science may be far easier to work than the simple things. And Lovaii is smiling. Would you like to add anything there? The simple things.
Yeah, I think the simple thing, on nomination, particularly that people are talking about, what I tend to do is that since most people are having trading accounts, they typically end up having NSDL statements. And when we get the NSDL statement, our first sort of eye goes on, how much has it gone up or down during the last month, last 3 months, etc. I sort of take the clients to the last page and say, please look at this page and see whether all your investments have got KYC written. It's done, whether there's a nomination in place, whether your mobile number is correct, whether the email ID is correct, the bank account is correct. The one other thing that I've realized, which is little beyond this, is maybe we can, check with this audience itself. How many of you have checked and confirmed that the name as per passport, Aadhaar, PAN card, bank account and investment is exactly the same? And if it's not, then I think you need to start working on that and getting that in place, because that's probably one of the things to do before your retirement, because in your retirement it will be tough for you to do this.
Absolutely. Sandeep, a related question to you. And, there are quite a few youngsters sitting out here. While we are talking about retirement and while we are talking about this housekeeping items, if I happen to attend this seminar and picked up one point that nomination, joint holding, etc., are critically important, how should I carry out that conversation with my parents? Because that's a tough one.
Yeah, and in India, and I was just discussing with somebody outside that when the moment we talk about death, it's like, why are you talking about it? We should not discuss that, right? And I think the right way to do it is, as was suggested, where you put out the data. I think when you look at, even as parents, and in fact in our family we have this conversation where our parents we put down all the list of investments, who was the first holder, second holder, nominee. The moment they saw that there are missing gaps, the human mind wants to fill up those gaps, right? So just looking at that statement, putting together that on an Excel sheet is very important. And a related point to that is the fact that we need to review the portfolio every once in a while, right? A housekeeping of the portfolio is also important. Typically what happens in the course of the building of a portfolio is that we end up adding new instruments over a period of time. There was one instrument, let's say, which I added 20 years ago, added 1 lakh, today it's worth, say, 2.5 lakh, but now my portfolio has grown to become, say, 1 crore, right? Is that instrument relevant in the course of my portfolio? Should I move that, consolidated? We have this app called Wealth Monitor where we import portfolios and do a review. There are often times when we find that there are 35 to 40 individual mutual funds in a portfolio size of between 1 to 1.5 crores, right? And some of that housekeeping periodically is also required. That keeps everything aligned, because the newer investments that we do are ones where we have a first holder, second holder nomination. These things get aligned. So one is putting down all the assets in a single table and doing a portfolio audit, and secondly, reviewing your portfolio from the number of instruments we have, and are those instruments relative or relevant in the current size of my portfolio?
Sadique, one question to you and then last question to Dhruv. What is the role of insurance and emergency fund, especially in the retirement years?
I think emergency funds play a very important role. Insurance, it is difficult to get in the later age, but definitely as we age, there are a lot of medical emergencies which come up. And to that extent, I go back to my own life. Parents, definitely as they age, definitely there are many emergencies, including joint pains and knee replacement. So to that extent, it's very important to maintain emergency funds, not just in the older years, but right from the beginning. I have this popular saying, that our parents should not be our emergency funds, and our children should not be our retirement funds. And this happens when you are having all these basics in place, fundamentals in place. And emergency funds, another thing which is very important, many people tend to create emergency funds, but forget to keep it replenishing, because we keep using it for on and off, apart from our medicals and stuff like that. So it's important to not just create it, but replenish it whenever it is due, and also keep it increasing as per the inflation. It's not a static figure. So that's something which we need to be taking care of. And just to excuse, I need to take your leave.
Sure.
I have a flight to catch. So thanks a lot.
Sure.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it. Yeah.
Thanks, Sadique. And this is typically what happens in retirement years. Your friends and colleagues keep leaving you early. So, yeah,
Thanks a lot.
But
Thanks, Outlook Money.
this
Thank
is
you.
the last question for Dhruv, and then we anyway wind up the panel. But thanks, Sadique. Thanks a lot. So, Dhruv, from here on to retirement, especially for people who are in their 30s, and so there are multiple other goals, financial goals that they have to take care of. How does one balance between those goals and retirement?
Yeah, so I think there's no one answer. It is very individual situation. And I think whether it is a retirement or any other goal, I think it starts with your own dreams and ambitions and desire that what you want to do with your life. And financial planning helps in, quantifying the amount that you need. And unless you work on it, because somebody who is 30, 40, he might need a housing, which would be important. He might need money for children's education, which is important. And of course, I think what has been mentioned is longevity of life. So all three, I think there are these three large roles that one should try and quantify. All are important. It is not one versus the other, but therefore all the more the need that you should sit down with a planner, put down and plan so that you can have a financially free life.
Brilliant. Vivek has a point to add, please.
Yeah, so typically, I think this is something which I have seen very close in the practice, is that when goals conflict, when you have a retirement goal and you have a children's education, the reason probably which we attributed is the narrative what you give. The narrative which you give to your children, okay? Say that you are, you will be going to UK to study from graduation. Now, since they are growing up, if the narrative is set in their mind, then it is your obligation to send them to UK for graduation. So whatever it may cost, it may also cost your retirement completely. So I think the question here really is that what narratives are you giving to your children? See, at some point of time, there needs to be a flexibility and an agility in the way you handle it. The narratives have to be such that they motivate the child, but they don't create an obligation on you. And many a times it happens that the parents are under severe obligation because now the child is adult or kind of so-called adult, and they will say, this is what we want to do because you have been telling me for the last 15 years now. And now you are saying that, my job is not too certain, it's a VUCA world, etc. So I think what is very important while children are also growing is that when you are giving a narrative, that narrative has to be a responsible narrative from your point of view. You might be surprised to see that it doesn't conflict with your key goals in terms of the retirement. This is something which we have seen very closely, Amit.
Thanks, Vivek. A few things are emerging quite clearly that while retirement planning remains a challenge, earlier we start, the better. Even if we don't have a number in mind in the beginning, it's okay. Starting is far more important than anything else. The conversations are important between kids and parents, grown-up children and parents at various points in time. So thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure talking to all of you, and I think it was a very insightful discussion. Thank you so much.